I know exactly what my mother's last words to me were, and I replay them sometimes when I need a shot of pure, unadulterated resolve. They were a venomous parting gift, perfectly chosen to cut the deepest. You are nothing but a spoiled, ugly college dropout. Don't you dare show that pathetic face around this family again. The oak door of our beautiful multi-million-dollar colonial home in Brentwood, Nashville, slammed shut with a finality that rattled the windows. I remember the sound vividly. It wasn't just a door closing. It was the sound of my childhood being shredded, of every tentative hope for reconciliation being extinguished. I stood there, 22 years old, on the impeccably manicured porch. My oversized, cheap suitcase, not one of the designer pieces my family traveled with, sat sadly at my feet. Through the lace-curtained window of the formal living room, I could see my younger sister, Skye, laughing easily with my parents, Richard and Blair. She was perfectly framed, the golden girl, the effortless successor. I watched them for a long, agonizing moment until the tears finally started, blurring the perfect picture of the family I no longer belonged to. That was 5 years ago. My name is Ava, and I'm 27 now. In those 5 years, I was forced to confront the brutal truth. I had always been the family's embarrassment, the one who was too quiet, too creative, too much of a dreamer, and ultimately, too much of a failure to deserve their love or support. Skye, on the other hand, was everything they had meticulously groomed her to be. She was stunningly beautiful, fiercely intelligent, ruthlessly ambitious, and, most crucially, their flawlessly executed project. Growing up in Nashville's elite circles, I learned early on that love within my family was less a verb and more a contract. My parents, who ran a highly successful real estate development firm, had a rigid set of expectations for their daughters. We were expected to be extensions of their status, polished, accomplished, and socially impeccable. Skye slid into that mold as smoothly as a tailored glove. I did not. My fall from grace began in my junior year of college. I had managed to get into a reputable state university, but my major was my first unforgivable sin: graphic design. I adored it, creating art, playing with typography, building visual worlds on a screen. It was my refuge, my purpose. But to my parents, it was a joke. Graphic design is a hobby, Ava, my father, Richard, had declared during a particularly brutal phone call. His voice was always cold, efficient, and devoid of warmth when discussing my choices. It's what people who lack the drive for real business degrees pursue. You're wasting our tuition money on glorified coloring books. My mother, Blair, was far worse. She weaponized Skye's success with surgical precision. Your sister is going pre-med at Duke, Ava. She's going to be a neurosurgeon. What are you going to be? Someone who makes pretty website banners for local bakeries? You have an obligation to this family name. You need to switch to finance or law immediately. The constant barrage wore me down like acid rain on marble. Every conversation became an interrogation. Every visit home, a lecture about my lack of foresight, my plain appearance, and my questionable future. They made it abundantly clear that I was a fundamental disappointment. Their disapproval wasn't just critical. It felt physical, like a weight crushing my chest. I tried to push through their expectations while balancing my genuine passion, but the cognitive dissonance was too great. I started suffering from severe anxiety and depression. When I finally confessed my struggle to them, desperate for a shred of empathy, my mother's response was a chilling dismissal. Stop being so dramatic, Ava. You need to focus. Mental health issues are for weak people who can't handle stress. We raised you better than that. The descent was quick and terrifying. My grades plummeted. I couldn't concentrate. I stopped attending classes and often went days without eating properly. I truly stopped believing I was worth anything at all. In one particularly dark moment, paralyzed by the overwhelming pressure and mental exhaustion, I made the decision that would seal my fate. I left college. When I delivered the news to my parents, the explosion was immediate and deafening. My mother screamed, her face contorted in a mask of fury, raging about how I had embarrassed them socially, how I had thrown away my potential, and how I was too stupid to understand the gravity of my mistake. My father simply looked at me with an expression of cold, surgical disgust, the kind reserved for a failed investment, and said I was no longer his daughter. Skye stood silently in the doorway, observing the entire spectacle. I saw the faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips, a look of vindicated superiority. She didn't have to say anything. My failure was her ultimate success, cementing her position as the one true golden child. They gave me exactly 1 week to gather my belongings and vacate the house. There would be no safety net, no financial assistance, no place to stay, and no family to rely on. I was suddenly, terrifyingly, entirely on my own, standing on that porch in Brentwood, holding a cheap suitcase and watching them laugh inside without me. The contract of conditional love had been formally terminated. I was terrified, yes, but underneath the fear, a tiny ember of defiance began to glow. I was about to find out exactly what I was capable of when everything was taken away. I didn't know it then, but their cruelty had just handed me the greatest gift of my life, true independence. I had nothing left to lose, and that I would soon realize was a powerful, dangerous freedom. When the heavy oak door closed on my face, cutting me off from the life I had known, the physical rejection was nothing compared to the emotional trauma. The feeling of utter worthlessness they had cultivated in me for years finally came to a head, threatening to drown me entirely. To understand the gravity of that moment, the moment I was truly left without a net, you have to understand the insidious, creeping pressure cooker that was life in the Richardson household. My parents, Blair and Richard, weren't cruel in the typical shouting sense. Their cruelty was structural, built on the foundation of the image they needed to project to their friends in Nashville's most exclusive circles. Our family was their masterpiece, and every detail, from the perfectly matched marble countertops to the college degrees hanging on the wall, had to be flawless. I was the one smudge on the canvas they couldn't stand. From the time I was old enough to hold a crayon, I preferred silence, drawing, and quiet observation. Skye, 2 years younger, preferred the spotlight. She thrived on attention, excelled in high-demand subjects like math and science, and possessed a natural beauty that developed right on schedule with my mother's demanding timelines. I, with my less pronounced features and my messy love for creative arts, was always found wanting. This comparison was the core mechanism of their conditional love, and it was constant. I remember turning 8 years old and proudly showing my mother a watercolor I had painted in art class. My teacher, Ms. Elena, had praised it profusely, telling me I had a rare sense of color and movement. She'd even displayed it prominently on the school wall. When I presented it to Blair, my mother barely glanced up from her iPad, scrolling through photos from a recent charity gala. "It's nice, Ava." "Very busy," she said, her tone implying that busy was synonymous with childish and unsophisticated. She then swiftly changed the topic. "Did you finish practicing your piano sonata?" Skye already mastered hers last week. "Remember, pretty pictures don't get you into a good school, honey." Richard didn't even acknowledge the painting, simply grunting a request for the newspaper from behind his silk tie. That small memory, insignificant as it sounds, was the first brick laid in the wall between my talent and their acceptance. As I grew older, the criticism sharpened. I internalized the message. My inherent worth was tied solely to my utility in bolstering their social standing. If I couldn't be as effortlessly beautiful and charismatic as Sky, I had to compensate by being intellectually brilliant in a field they approved of: law, business, medicine, anything that required a prestige title they could drop casually at their country club dinners. My love for graphic design was deemed frivolous, a self-indulgent waste of the family's resources. The pressure intensified exponentially when I entered college. While Sky was preparing for her pre-med track, I was desperately trying to make my design major palatable to my parents. I overloaded my schedule with every business minor available, trying to prove I was serious, that I wasn't just playing with glorified coloring books. But the stress of navigating their expectations alongside my own growing internal conflict, the feeling that I was living a lie, became paralyzing. I started withdrawing. The vibrant colors in my design projects faded into monochrome. The deadlines piled up, mocking my inability to focus. My apartment near campus, which my parents funded but rarely visited, became a cage. The calls home, which were supposed to be encouraging, felt like quarterly reviews where my performance was judged harshly against Sky's perfect report card. She was already interning at a prestigious lab in Boston. I was staring at a blank screen, unable to complete a simple logo design. When the anxiety turned into crippling depression, it wasn't a sudden event. It was a slow, agonizing slide. I couldn't get out of bed. The thought of facing a classroom or a professor filled me with physical nausea. The weight of their disappointment was too much to carry. I started having panic attacks in the middle of the night, convinced I was failing them and myself. When I finally reached out, admitting that I needed professional help, my mother's response was the most shocking betrayal of all. It was not just the lack of sympathy, but the active minimization of my pain. "Ava, people who are truly smart don't let their emotions control them," she'd said, her voice dripping with chilly condescension. "You need to pull yourself together. We don't have time for this drama. You are jeopardizing your entire future and our reputation with this nonsense." They threatened to cut off my tuition if I didn't raise my grades instantly. That threat, that ultimate financial weapon, was what finally broke me. The thought of trying to recover while fighting them, while pretending to be someone I wasn't, felt impossible. I realized with a sickening clarity that the only way to save myself, to find any internal peace, was to exit the system entirely. Dropping out wasn't a reckless choice. It was an act of self-preservation, a frantic escape from a mental prison they had constructed brick by brick. The confrontation that followed, the one where my father declared me dead to him and my mother delivered her final, cruel verdict on the porch, was simply the official execution of the contract. I had breached the terms of conditional love, therefore I was cancelled. As I stood there with the door shut, watching Sky's joyful face through the window, the terrifying realization hit me. I didn't just lose my home or my money. I lost the illusion that my family would ever prioritize my well-being over their image. That understanding was the necessary, painful catalyst. It wiped the slate clean. They had taken away every comfort, every security blanket, every false hope. In doing so, they inadvertently gave me the greatest gift a person can receive, the blank, frightening space required to build a life based entirely on my own, genuine self. That terrifying silence, the absence of their judging voices, was the starting point for my true, arduous journey. Stepping off that porch and onto the street with my meager suitcase was like being abruptly ejected from a high-speed train in the middle of a desert. The shock of it was physical. The world, which had always been cushioned and curated by my family's wealth, suddenly felt hard, noisy, and indifferent. I was 22, severely depressed, and utterly unqualified for anything outside of abstract design concepts and the crushing weight of my parents' disappointment. For the first few months, I was a ghost floating through Nashville. My initial survival was thanks to the kindness of friends. Old college acquaintances who didn't fully understand the depth of my despair or the finality of my banishment, but offered a couch, a bowl of ramen, or a cheap floor to sleep on. I couch-surfed from apartment to apartment, moving every few weeks, always feeling like a burden, always apologizing for taking up space. This phase was the absolute, rock-bottom, lowest point of my life. I needed money immediately. The small amount of cash I had saved from summer jobs vanished quickly. I had no prestigious degree, no connections, and a gap in my resume where a high-status education should have been. I took any job I could find. My first real gig was waitressing at a bustling, greasy spoon diner near the interstate. I worked the graveyard shift, wiping down sticky counters and dealing with tired, often rude, truckers and shift workers. I followed that up with retail work at a massive chain store, folding clothes and enduring the relentless cheer of my managers. Then came the cleaning jobs, late nights spent scrubbing offices in downtown skyscrapers. The irony of cleaning the same buildings my father's firm had developed not lost on me. I worked 3, sometimes 4, minimum wage jobs at once. My schedule was brutal, a continuous cycle of exhaustion and caffeine. I often went to bed hungry because I had to choose between buying a cheap meal and saving the $10 for a bus pass or, critically, an hour of internet access at a public library. There were days when the sheer physical pain of surviving, the aching feet, the constant hunger, the sleep deprivation, eclipsed the mental anguish. And in a strange way, that physical struggle was a kind of therapy. It was real, tangible pain, a clear enemy I could fight back against, unlike the nebulous, psychological warfare waged by my parents. During those dark months, a profound shift occurred. The despair didn't vanish, but something fierce and unbreakable took root. Maybe it was the anger that finally boiled over. Maybe it was the pure, visceral desperation, but most likely it was simple, raw stubbornness. I realized that the narrative my family had created, that I was weak, a failure, a person who couldn't handle stress, was the very thing I had to demolish. I was not going to let them define me anymore. I refused to let their version of my life become my reality. My new purpose became fiercely simple: survive, and then prove them catastrophically wrong. I started saving every single dollar, treating it like sacred ammunition. I stopped spending money on anything unnecessary. My clothes were thrifted, my meals consisted of rice and beans, and my entertainment was limited to the free internet at the city library after my graveyard shift. But survival wasn't enough. I needed to get back to my true self, to the art that had been my passion. I couldn't afford college, but I realized I didn't need their expensive, approved institution. The knowledge was online. I began teaching myself advanced design software, utilizing free tutorials on YouTube and open-source learning platforms. I would work my cleaning job until 3 a.m., ride the bus home, sleep for 4 hours, and then spend the morning coding and designing on an ancient, used laptop I bought for $150. My makeshift studio was usually a corner in a friend's cramped apartment or a quiet booth in a coffee shop where I nursed a single refillable cup of coffee for hours. I built my portfolio in every spare moment I could steal. The work wasn't just practice. It was an act of defiance, a silent scream of existence. My design style changed too. It became sharper, more focused, imbued with a raw honesty that came from my new life experience. I reached out to small businesses, the kind my parents would never touch, offering to design their logos, flyers, and simple websites for next to nothing, just to build real-world experience and get testimonials. My first client was a small, independent coffee roaster who paid me $100 and a year's supply of coffee beans. That small victory felt more meaningful than any accolade my family could have engineered. There were so many nights when the voice of my mother, chillingly articulate, would echo in my head. "You're foolish, Ava. You can't succeed without us. This is just temporary." I fought that voice every single day. I kept going, driven by the burning need to rewrite my own story. Slowly, painfully, things began to change. My work improved dramatically. My clients began to pay slightly more, and the small seed of an idea, a real, viable future, began to sprout in the cold, hard earth of my solitude. I was learning to thrive in the dark, and I was about to find the sunlight. The transition from desperate survival to self-sustaining growth was not a flip of a switch, but a gradual, deliberate climb. By the time I could finally stop couch surfing and afford a genuinely tiny, single-room studio apartment, a place with leaky pipes but a door that locked and belonged solely to me, I felt an ownership and pride that far surpassed anything the Richardson Mansion had offered. That little studio in East Nashville became my sanctuary and my command center. My initial clients, the small bakeries and local microbreweries, started referring me to slightly bigger, more stable businesses. I had inadvertently found a niche, providing high-quality, emotionally resonant design work for small to mid-sized companies that felt intimidated by the big, impersonal agencies downtown. Because my rent was cheap and my overhead was negligible, I could maintain competitive pricing while delivering premium results. I treated every project as if it were the most important campaign of my life, pouring my entire focus into understanding the client's genuine needs. I wasn't just selling graphics. I was selling clarity, identity, and trust. This dedication led to better outcomes, which led to better word of mouth. Soon, I was charging rates that were no longer embarrassing. I was getting consistent work, and for the first time since leaving college, my bank account held balance that ended in 3 digits, then 4, and eventually 5. The most critical moment in this phase was meeting Ethan. He owned a small but highly effective digital marketing firm, and he initially hired me to handle his overflow design work. Ethan was smart, pragmatic, and possessed the sharp business acumen I lacked. He immediately recognized the power and emotional depth of my design style. He also, crucially, recognized the sheer grit required to build a portfolio of my quality from nothing. After collaborating successfully on several projects, Ethan sat me down one day in my little studio, surrounded by my worn furniture and stacks of design books. "Ava," he said, pushing a printed spreadsheet toward me, "you are an artist, but you are terrible at the business of being an artist. You need structure, you need sales, and you need scale. You are too good to be a freelancer living project to project." He proposed a partnership. I would focus 100% on the creative direction and client delivery. He would handle the entire operational and financial side, contracts, hiring, taxes, and strategic growth. It was a terrifying leap of faith, but I trusted him. He saw my potential, not my past. We officially launched Ava Design Studio exactly 3 years after I had been thrown out of my parents' house. We moved into a modest office space, a functional, open-concept loft in an industrial area, a world away from the sterile glass towers where Richard and Blair conducted their business. Our first hire was a junior designer, and that team of 3 grew rapidly. Ethan was a genius at networking and structuring deals. I was able to manage the creative process and maintain the high quality that was becoming our signature. The years that followed were a blur of exhausting but exhilarating work. I worked harder than I ever had in college, but the crucial difference was that every hour was fueled by passion, not fear. I worked to prove something to myself, not to my parents. The revenue figures grew exponentially. We were landing bigger clients, regional chains, tech startups, even some nonprofits, and our annual revenue crossed the $1 million mark, then pushed toward 2. I moved out of the cramped studio and into a comfortable 1-bedroom apartment in a safe, central neighborhood. Every piece of furniture, every lamp, every piece of art on the wall was purchased with money I had earned. This was not their money. This was my currency of independence. During these 5 years of building, I achieved something even more important than financial success. I achieved psychological freedom. I changed my phone number, moved across the city, and cut all ties with my family. The silence, once terrifying, became protective. I healed the depression and anxiety by doing the work that gave me purpose and surrounding myself with people who valued my talent, not my status. Then, 5 years to the day I left, I received an unexpected message on LinkedIn. It was from an old high school acquaintance, a casual, friendly invitation to celebrate Sky's graduation. She was finally finishing her medical residency. The golden child was officially a doctor. The invitation mentioned a massive, exclusive celebration at a premier downtown venue. Staring at the message, I felt a tremor of something complex, not longing, not regret, but a sharp, clear desire for confrontation. I had built a new life, a secure foundation. It was time to face the ghosts of my past, not as the broken girl they discarded, but as the strong, self-made woman I had become. The past was calling, and for the first time I felt ready to answer. The invitation to Sky's graduation party felt less like a chance for a family reunion and more like a psychological trap. Why would they want me there, the person they had so publicly and viciously disowned? The rational part of me knew the answer. They wouldn't. The invitation had come from a friend who was clearly unaware of the family's brutal internal politics. Sky and my parents were not expecting me, and that realization was what finally tipped the scales. For a week, I wrestled with the invitation. Ignore it, Ethan advised. Why introduce chaos back into a life you've worked so hard to sanitize? Just keep moving forward. That was the smart, logical choice. My business was thriving, my life was stable, and my peace of mind was priceless. But another, deeper part of me, the part that still carried the scars of being told I was worthless, felt a fierce, undeniable need for vindication. I didn't want their approval anymore. That ship had sailed and sunk 5 years ago. What I craved was for them to witness my existence, my success, my wholeness, and realize in that single, gut punch moment exactly what they had thrown away. They needed to see that the ugly college dropout was not only surviving, but thriving, doing it entirely without their money, their name, or their network. This wasn't about revenge. It was about definitive closure delivered publicly. The party was scheduled for a Saturday evening at the Heritage Ballroom, one of Nashville's most prestigious event spaces, reserved for only the city's most established elite. I knew my parents, Blair and Richard, would spare absolutely no expense for Sky. They lived for these displays of status, these perfect, curated events designed to reaffirm their position and the perfection of the Richardson dynasty. This was their Oscar night, and Sky was their award. My preparation for the evening was meticulous and deliberate. This wasn't about dressing up, it was about armor. I wanted to embody the success I had built. I called a professional stylist, a service I now easily afforded, and discussed my vision, powerful, elegant, and understated. I chose a stunning, simple black gown, custom-tailored, that spoke of confidence rather than flashiness. I spent hours on my hair and makeup, not to impress them, but to feel an unshakable sense of self. When I looked in the mirror, I saw Ava, the CEO of Ava Design Studio, the woman who fought her way out of the gutter. The scared, broken girl was officially gone. As I drove my own car, a reliable, well-maintained luxury sedan I bought used, into the valet line of the Heritage, the scene was exactly as expected. Crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere. A string quartet playing classical arrangements of modern hits, and servers in immaculate uniforms circulating with champagne flutes. The air was thick with the scent of ambition and expensive perfume. I arrived fashionably late, which gave me a crucial moment to stand back and take in the scene before making my entry. The room was packed with people I recognized from my childhood, extended family members who had politely ignored my struggles, business associates of my father who viewed people in terms of net worth, and society friends of my mother who judged women by their clothing labels. They were all there to celebrate Sky. There she was, Sky, the star of the night, glowing in a pristine white dress, radiating the success of a newly minted doctor. She was laughing, surrounded by her handsome, high-achieving fiancé and my beaming parents, Richard and Blair. They flanked her, their faces alight with the unmistakable, proprietary pride of having engineered this perfect outcome. I took a deep, centering breath. The familiar tightness that used to seize my chest in their presence was still there, but now it was mixed with a steelier emotion, certainty. I wasn't the pathetic dropout seeking forgiveness. I was the uninvited guest, and I was about to look them in the eye as an equal, no, as a superior, and show them precisely the caliber of person they had so carelessly discarded. I smoothed my dress, adjusted my expression into a mask of calm professionalism, and stepped into the dazzling, treacherous heart of the party. The game had officially begun. Moving through the crowded ballroom felt surreal, like navigating a familiar dreamscape. People glanced my way, their eyes passing over me without a flicker of recognition. 5 years is a long time, especially when you trade despair for purpose. I was thinner, my posture was corrected, and the fear that used to cling to my face had been replaced by a quiet, almost intimidating confidence. The Ava they remembered was an anxious, defeated college kid. The woman standing there now was a successful business owner. They didn't see the connection, and that invisibility was a potent advantage. I made my way to the bar, ordering a complex, expensive cocktail, a small, internal luxury I savored. As I waited, I heard a voice that instantly transported me back to the few good moments of my college years. "Ava, is that really you?" I turned, genuinely surprised, to see Professor Davies. He had taught the core design theory classes and was one of the only faculty members who truly saw the potential in my early work, long before the darkness consumed me. He looked older, his hair grayer, but his kind, inquisitive eyes were the same. "Professor Davies," I replied, a rush of genuine warmth replacing my professional facade. "What are you doing here?" He smiled kindly. "I teach an ethics course at the medical school now, a sort of capstone for the residency program. Sky was in my class, brilliant, driven girl." He paused, studying my face with a careful scrutiny I hadn't felt in years. I heard you left school, Ava. I worried about you. You had a rare talent, a true artist's eye. His words, simple and honest, were a heavier weight than any criticism from my parents. Here was someone who had valued my inherent ability, and I had simply vanished. It underscored the severity of the mental health crisis that had forced me to disappear. I had some personal issues I had to work through, I said, choosing my words carefully. But I'm doing much better now, Professor. I own my own design agency. I launched it 3 years ago. His eyes widened in a genuinely pleased, surprised way. Seriously? That is fantastic. I knew you had it in you. Your work always had that spark, even back then. I remember telling you your color palettes were sophisticated for your age. He chatted for a few more minutes, catching up on my professional progress, showing a level of interest and pride that my own father had never managed. He was the first person in this entire room to validate my journey, and it fortified my resolve more than any expensive dress ever could. As our conversation wound down, Professor Davies excused himself to speak to other guests. I watched him go, feeling a mixture of gratitude and acute isolation. This was my family celebration, yet the only person who offered genuine connection was a professor from the school I dropped out of. I moved to the edge of the dessert table, a quiet corner where I could observe. That's when I heard her. My mother, Blair, was speaking to a cluster of women, all draped in designer gowns and radiating the polished entitlement of Nashville high society. "We're just so proud of Sky," Blair was saying, her voice a low, melodious purr designed for social performance. Medical school was challenging, but she never wavered. So focused, unlike some people. The implication was clear, even without my name being spoken. Then Richard, my father, joined the conversation, looping his arm around Blair's waist, cementing their perfect parental unity. "Yes, we've been very fortunate," Richard chimed in smoothly. "Both our daughters have done exceptionally well. Sky is, of course, a doctor, and our eldest, Ava, is extremely successful in business, travels extensively, based out of London and Paris mostly. We're terribly proud of her career trajectory." I froze. My mind struggled to process the audacity. They had disowned me, called my chosen career glorified coloring books, and now they were lying to their most trusted friends, pretending I was a jet-setting business mogul whose success they could take credit for. They were using my actual hard-won success, a success they knew nothing about and actively scorned, to polish their own reputation. A colleague of my father's, an elegant woman named Helen, leaned in. "Oh, I wasn't aware you had another daughter, Richard. How wonderful. I'd love to meet her. Does she ever come back to Nashville?" Blair's smile tightened, perfectly strained. "She couldn't make it tonight, Helen. Work commitments, you know how it is with international consulting. But she sends her absolute love and regrets." The lie was so practiced, so casual, that I realized they hadn't invented this story tonight. They had been perfecting this elaborate fiction for years. They wanted the prestige of having 2 successful daughters without the inconvenience of dealing with a problematic one. They were maintaining their perfect family illusion by turning me into an accomplished, but conveniently absent fiction. The realization made my blood run cold, but also crystallized my mission. This wasn't just about making them see my success. It was about exposing the core deception that underpinned their entire privileged existence. I had to wait, gather more evidence, and find the perfect moment to shatter their meticulously constructed reality. The initial shock of my parents' elaborate lie quickly gave way to a cold, strategic fury. They hadn't just moved on. They had fabricated a narrative where I was a high-flying international consultant who was too successful to waste time on their small-town celebrations. The gall of it was breathtaking. They wanted the status conferred by my success, but none of the actual emotional accountability that came with a relationship. They were harvesting my hard-earned legitimacy to shore up their own crumbling image. I needed to be smart, not emotional. A public scene right now would simply be spun as the unstable, dramatic daughter acting out, confirming their narrative. I had to secure evidence, a final, undeniable truth that couldn't be dismissed as mere jealousy. I retreated deeper into the room, blending in near the floral arrangements, observing and listening. Sky, the center of the universe tonight, walked past me, heading towards a private hallway that led to the venue's conference rooms. She was radiant, engaged in an animated conversation with her fiancé and a few of her medical school friends. Her eyes briefly swept over me, the ghost in the black dress, without the slightest flicker of recognition. To her, I was simply part of the expensive scenery. That moment stung more than any of my mother's past insults. I was invisible to the person I had shared a childhood with. Curiosity compelled me to follow. Keeping a safe distance, I saw Sky slip into one of the smaller, private function rooms. I waited a beat, then quietly pushed the door open, just enough to listen, holding my phone ready to record. Sky was pacing, speaking quickly and quietly into her phone. "I know, Mom," she was saying, her voice tight with tension. "I'm handling it. No one has asked about Ava specifically. Everyone bought the story about her working overseas." She paused, listening intently. The next line, delivered in a sharp whisper, hit me like a physical blow. "But what if she does show up, Mom? Even if she found out somehow, she wouldn't have the guts to come back after 5 years, right?" They had actively discussed keeping the party a secret from me. This wasn't just casual lying. It was a coordinated, deliberate exclusion designed to maintain their clean narrative. The betrayal felt fresh and sickening. Then Sky's tone shifted, becoming lower and more conspiratorial. "The trust fund," she continued, confirming my worst fears. "Yes, I spoke to Donald, their family attorney, last week. Since she's been out of contact for so long, and there's clear documentation of her dropping out of college and cutting ties, Donald thinks we can argue that she forfeited her portion. He's confident we can make the legal claim stick. It'll just take some time." My entire body went cold. It wasn't just about their reputation. It was about outright theft. My grandmother, the only person in the family who ever offered unconditional affection, had set up a substantial trust fund for both Sky and me. I had never touched the money, too busy proving I could succeed without it, but the money was legally mine. And my family, my parents and my sister, were actively plotting to steal it. Sky let out a short, high-pitched laugh that grated on my nerves. "Don't worry, Mom. She made her choice when she dropped out. She chose to throw her life away. That money is better off with someone who actually finished their education and made you proud. She chose to throw her life away. That casual cruelty, the dismissal of my mental health crisis, the years of struggle and self-hatred, the sheer physical effort it took to survive as a mere bad choice was the final, unforgivable insult. They weren't just embarrassed by me. They were opportunists trying to monetize my suffering. I slowly backed away from the door, my hands trembling violently, but the phone was recording the entire exchange. I had it all. Proof of their public lies, proof of their private exclusion, and undeniable proof of their intent to commit financial fraud. The narrative was no longer about a dramatic family squabble. It was about systemic abuse and attempted theft. I walked back towards the main ballroom, feeling an overwhelming clarity. This couldn't be handled quietly. Their actions were built on a foundation of status and public perception, and I realized the only way to truly defeat them was to dismantle that foundation in the most public way possible. I needed help and I needed strategy. I pulled out my phone and quickly texted Ethan, my partner, a simple, desperate SOS. Need legal help. Family trying to steal inheritance. Have recording of admission. What do I do? The game wasn't just about closure anymore. Now it was about justice. Ethan's response was immediate and focused. Do not confront them yet. Leave the party. Meet me at Marcus's office tomorrow morning. Bring everything. He was right. I needed to move with legal precision, not emotional explosion. But leaving now felt like retreat, like letting them win the battle of public perception. I steadied myself and walked back toward the center of the room. The evening was reaching its peak. Richard, my father, was already on the small stage, mic in hand, preparing to deliver his keynote speech, the capstone moment of their family's perfect narrative. I positioned myself near the edge of the large crowd, close enough to see and be seen, but far enough to control my own space. Richard, wearing his most practiced, charming smile, began his address. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us to celebrate this momentous occasion. Tonight, we honor my daughter, Sky, who has worked tirelessly to achieve her dream of becoming a doctor. The crowd applauded the golden girl, standing next to Blair, both radiant and picture-perfect. Richard continued, leaning into the microphone with theatrical sincerity. As a father, there is truly nothing more rewarding than watching your children succeed. My wife and I have been blessed with two remarkable daughters, both intelligent, both driven, both determined to make their mark on the world. I felt my jaw clench, so tightly I thought my teeth might crack. He was doing it again, weaving the perfect fiction. Sky, as many of you know, has always been focused and dedicated, he went on, listing her achievements. And tonight, as she celebrates her graduation from one of the finest medical schools in the country, we couldn't be prouder. Then came the lie, delivered with smooth, practiced conviction. Our other daughter, Ava, sadly couldn't be here tonight due to her work commitments overseas. She sends her love and congratulations to her sister. Ava has built an incredibly successful design business and travels extensively for work. We are deeply proud of both our girls and the incredible women they have become. The ease with which he fabricated my entire life story was staggering. He looked out at the nodding, approving crowd, absorbing the collective admiration for his seemingly perfect, dual success story family. It was a performance designed to solidify their status, using my unseen, unverified accomplishments as the ultimate social currency. As Richard stepped down from the stage, accepting hugs and handshakes, Professor Davies, the good man from my college days, found his way back to me. "A lovely speech, Ava," he commented, his expression pleasant but slightly confused. "Though I must say I am quite surprised. I didn't even know you had a sibling until tonight, let alone one who was overseas." I looked at him carefully, discerning no malicious intent, only genuine confusion. His clean conscience and genuine surprise were the contrast I needed. "That's interesting, Professor," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "because I am his other daughter. Sky is my sister." Professor Davies's friendly smile instantly faded. He looked from me to Richard, then back again, his mind visibly struggling to connect the dots. I don't understand. He just said you were overseas." He lied. I stated simply, "I'm right here." I've been here all evening, and no one in my family has recognized me because they haven't seen me in 5 years. Not since they disowned me for dropping out of college due to a mental health crisis." He stared, shocked by the abrupt, ugly truth laid bare beneath the veneer of the grand party. "But he just said he was proud of you. He spoke of your successful business." "I do have a successful business," I confirmed, a flicker of cold pride in my voice. "But they know nothing about it. They have no idea what I've been doing since they kicked me out. They've been making up stories about me to save face with their friends." Before Professor Davies could fully process this terrible family secret, Dr. Sterling, the dean of the medical school, a man of quiet authority, joined us. "Everything all right here, Davies?" he asked, sensing the sudden tension. Professor Davies looked at me, giving me the silent choice to remain silent. I seized the opportunity. "Dr. Sterling," I said, stepping forward, "I need to be absolutely honest with you about something before we discuss any potential contract. My full name is Ava Richardson. Skye is my sister. I am the daughter my father just mentioned in his speech, the one he claimed was overseas." Dr. Sterling's professional interest shifted to profound confusion. I don't follow." "Exactly," I said. "My father lied. He's been lying to everyone here about me. The truth is, my parents disowned me 5 years ago. They cut me off completely, told me never to contact them again, and pretended I didn't exist. Now they're using my real, hard-won success, which they know nothing about, to make themselves look like good parents. And worse," I lowered my voice, but not so low that Professor Davies couldn't hear, "they're actively plotting to steal my inheritance. I had just found 2 critical, respectable witnesses, and in the next chapter I knew exactly how I would use them to expose the truth that would shatter the Richardson facade entirely." Dr. Sterling looked from me to the distant, smiling figure of Richard and back again. The confusion on his face was replaced by a look of sober calculation. He was a man accustomed to navigating high-stakes professional ethics, and he clearly recognized a genuine crisis unfolding before him. "This is a serious accusation, Ms. Richardson," he stated, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of his office. "Do you have any proof of this treatment beyond your word? The public narrative is currently quite different." "It's not an accusation. It's the truth," I affirmed, my voice gaining strength. "And I came prepared." I pulled out my phone and showed him my driver's license, confirming my identity and my last name. "I also have a recording," I continued, meeting his gaze steadily. "A recording of my sister and mother from earlier tonight, discussing how relieved they were that I hadn't found out about this party, and how they planned to use my 5-year absence to claim I forfeited my grandmother's trust fund." Professor Davies gasped audibly. "Ava, I had no idea you had been through such an ordeal. That's unconscionable." "Most people don't," I said, feeling a strange, detached calm, "because I've spent the last 5 years focused entirely on rebuilding my life, not airing my family's private shame. But I came here tonight for closure, and instead, I discovered they've been lying about me for years, taking credit for my success and plotting theft." Dr. Sterling remained quiet for a long moment, watching my face, assessing my demeanor. "I believe you," he finally said, the 2 words cutting through the noisy atmosphere of the ballroom. "And I am appalled. However, this places me in an extremely awkward position. Your father is a known figure in the community, and I have known your family for years. I need to think carefully about proceeding with our business discussions." My heart sank. Of course, their reputation, their status, would always outweigh my truth. The system was rigged. But before I could process the familiar disappointment, Professor Davies spoke up, his voice ringing with quiet authority. With respect, Dr. Sterling, Ava's family situation has nothing to do with her professional capabilities. I taught her. Her work was exceptional then, and from what she's accomplished in the last 5 years, she has clearly done nothing but improve. Punishing her professionally because her family is dysfunctional would be grossly unfair. As a dean who values merit, you must separate the two. Dr. Sterling considered this, then nodded slowly. You are right, Davies. Personal matters shouldn't affect professional opportunities. Ms. Richardson, I will be in touch next week as planned. Your work speaks for itself. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. I saw Blair heading directly toward us, her face arranged in a welcoming smile, likely aiming to introduce Dr. Sterling to another pillar of their social circle. Dean Sterling, my mother called out as she approached. I wanted to introduce you to my dearest friend, Helen. She stopped mid-sentence when her eyes finally registered my face. The smile instantly evaporated. For a fleeting second, I saw confusion, then a chilling recognition, and finally, sheer panic draining the color from her skin. Ava, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the string quartet. Hello, Mother, I said calmly, allowing the smallest, coldest smile to touch my lips. Lovely party, though I notice I wasn't invited. Blair's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. She frantically glanced at Dr. Sterling and Professor Davies, her mind clearly racing to formulate a believable, status-saving lie. What are you doing here? She finally managed, her voice strained and tight. I was invited by a friend, I answered, though I've been here for over an hour now, and this is the first time anyone in my family has recognized me. Interesting, isn't it? Blair reached for my arm, her touch instantly repulsive. We need to discuss this privately, Ava. I took a deliberate step back, denying her contact. Why? You've been discussing me publicly all evening, haven't you? Telling everyone how proud you are, how successful I am, how I'm overseas working on my thriving business. Might as well keep it public, don't you think? You don't understand, she hissed, the pleasant facade beginning to crack. We were trying to protect the family. Protect the family? I repeated, my voice rising just enough to draw attention. Is that what you call disowning your daughter? Abandoning her when she was struggling with her mental health and kicking her out with nowhere to go? You made your choice 5 years ago, Mother. Tonight, I'm simply here to make sure you face the consequences of it. The tension was now palpable, the surrounding conversations beginning to fade as guests turned to watch the inevitable explosion. The commotion was now attracting a significant crowd. Richard, drawn by the sudden shift in the room's atmosphere, rushed over, his face moving through the same progression as Blair's. Recognition, fury, and trapped panic. Ava, he said, his voice struggling to maintain a facade of controlled authority. This is absolutely not the time or place for this discussion. You are making a spectacle. Really? I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Because you seem to have plenty to say about me in your little speech, Dad. All those convenient lies about how proud you are, about my successful overseas business, about the strength of family bonds and support. Should we tell everyone the truth? Should we tell them you haven't spoken to me in 5 years? That you told me I was no longer your daughter? People were definitely watching now. The conversations around us had stopped entirely, replaced by a dense silence punctured only by the faint, unaware melody of the string quartet. I saw Sky pushing her way through the onlookers, her face pale with alarm. "Ava, please," Richard pleaded, trying to physically steer me away, but I stood my ground. "You're being vindictive." "I'm being honest," I corrected him, my gaze fixed on my parents. "You've been making up an entire fictional life for me. You've been using my actual success, which you know nothing about, to make yourselves look like supportive parents, and now you're upset that I'm calling you out on it." Sky reached us, her voice sharp with protective fury. "What is going on? Your sister decided to show up uninvited and create drama at your graduation party, Mom. Just like her, to try to ruin your special day. Uninvited." I turned to Sky, my eyes cold. "Funny thing about that. I overheard your phone conversation earlier, Sky. The one where you told Mom how relieved you were that I didn't know about the party. The one where you discussed stealing my inheritance." Sky's face went utterly white. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, denying the undeniable. I held up my phone. "I recorded it. Would you like me to play it for everyone here? Let them hear you and Mom plotting to claim I forfeited my trust fund? Let them hear you laugh about how I threw my life away?" "You're insane." Sky spat, venom finally replacing the panic. "You always were unstable and dramatic." "I was struggling." I corrected her, my voice low and dangerous. "I was severely depressed and anxious and desperate for help. And instead of supporting me, all of you mocked me. You made me feel worthless until I believed it myself. You abandoned your daughter when she was most vulnerable. And you did it because her pain was inconvenient for your social status." Professor Davies cleared his throat, stepping forward to address the growing crowd. The intervention of a highly respected academic added immediate, devastating credibility to my claim. "I taught Ava in college," he announced, his voice carrying clearly. "She was one of the most talented students I've ever had. When she left school, I was devastated because I knew she had incredible potential. But I also knew she was struggling with something deeper than just academic stress. A good family would have helped her through that struggle. Instead, from what I'm hearing tonight, you abandoned her when she needed you most. And now, you're trying to take credit for her success and steal her inheritance. That is not family. That is exploitation." Richard's face was now beet red with anger and pure, blinding embarrassment. "You have no right to judge our family decisions. You don't know the full story." "Then enlighten us," Dr. Sterling stated quietly. Everyone turned to look at the dean of the medical school. "I'd very much like to hear your version of events, because right now what I'm hearing paints a very troubling picture." The crowd had grown enormous. Phones were out, recording the shocking collapse of the Richardson dynasty. Blair attempted one last, desperate effort to save face. "Ava has always been troubled. We tried everything to help her, but she refused our support." "That's a lie," I stated firmly, my voice unwavering. "You told me never to contact you again. You changed your phone numbers. You made it clear I was dead to you. I didn't disappear. You erased me. And the only reason you're upset now is because I showed up and ruined the pretty story you've been telling everyone." Just then I felt a strong, stabilizing hand on my elbow. Ethan, my business partner, had arrived, seeing my text and tracking my location. He was calm, polished, and ready for battle. "Everything okay here, Ava?" he asked, his tone professional, but his eyes promised total support. My heart, which had been pounding a frantic rhythm of panic and fury, finally settled into a steady, determined beat. Ethan's presence was the anchor I desperately needed. He was the physical manifestation of my hard work, my self-made success, and my strategic power. My family's eyes darted between Ethan and me, struggling to place him within their social hierarchy, their confusion adding another crack to their facade. "Richard Blair Skye," I said, introducing him with a dangerous calm. "This is Ethan Wells, my business partner. We run Ava Design Studio together." I paused, letting the name sink in. "Perhaps you'd like to see the portfolio Dad supposedly keeps in his office? Except, of course, you can't, because he doesn't actually have one. Because he has no idea what I've been doing for the past 5 years." Ethan, understanding the assignment perfectly, pulled out his slim, professional tablet. He opened our agency's website, a sleek, multi-million-dollar testament to creativity and precision, and turned the screen toward the horrified cluster of my parents, friends, and colleagues. "Ava Design Studio," Ethan announced, his voice calm, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Founded 3 years ago. We currently employ 25 people, full-time W-2 employees. Our annual revenue last year was just over $5 million. We service clients across the country, including several Fortune 500 companies in the tech and finance sectors." He swiped through the portfolio, displaying project after project. Complex web redesigns for major financial institutions, bold brand identities for innovative startups, multi-platform marketing campaigns. All my work created without a single cent or single ounce of encouragement from the people standing before me. "This is what Ava built after you threw her out," Ethan continued, his voice hardening slightly. "She started with nothing. She slept on couches, worked 3 minimum wage jobs while teaching herself advanced design skills, and saved every penny until she could afford her own apartment and launch this agency. She did all of this alone, and she has become one of the most sought-after creative directors in the Southeast." Blair stared at the screen, her face unreadable, her perfectly applied makeup unable to conceal the shock. Richard's jaw was clenched so tight the veins in his neck were popping. Skye looked like she had just been slapped across the face with a hard dose of reality. $5 million, Richard whispered, the shock giving way to pure, unadulterated greed in his eyes. "That's revenue, Richard," Ethan corrected, a subtle barb in his tone. "But yes, the business is quite successful, which makes it particularly glaring that you've been taking credit for her success while simultaneously trying to steal her inheritance." "We weren't stealing," Blair protested weakly, tears finally streaming down her face, the dramatic, controlled tears of a woman who knows she is losing her audience. "We were simply claiming what was rightfully ours after she abandoned the family." "I have a recording that says otherwise," I reminded her coolly. "Skye was very clear on the phone about the plan to claim I forfeited my trust fund. I'm sure a judge and the dean of the medical school standing right here would be very interested to hear it." Professor Davies interjected, speaking directly to Richard and Blair. "What is most disturbing here is the pattern of behavior. You didn't just reject Ava when she was vulnerable. You've spent 5 years lying about her, using her success to bolster your own reputation, and now attempting to defraud her. This isn't a family disagreement. This is systematic exploitation and fraud." Dr. Sterling addressed my parents directly, his demeanor now entirely cold and professional. "I've known your family for several years and respected you as colleagues. But what I'm hearing tonight is deeply troubling. If even half of what your daughter and Mr. Wells are saying is true, you have behaved abominably. Ethical conduct is paramount in every profession." "It was all true," I stated firmly every word, and I had documentation and witnesses who could attest to my mental state when they abandoned me. I had 5 years of successful business records built entirely separate from them. Richard tried one last, desperate attempt to regain control. Ava, you're being vindictive. Yes, we made mistakes, but we're still your family. We can work through this privately now. Privately? I asked, incredulous. After you publicly lied about me all evening? After you gave that touching speech about family bonds? You don't get to choose when to be public and when to be private based on what's convenient for you. The private matter of my inheritance is now a public legal issue. Ethan leaned close to me, whispering urgently, "The lawyer, Marcus, is here. I called him after your text. He's waiting outside." I nodded, feeling a powerful rush of relief. The public confrontation was over. Now the quiet, permanent work of justice was about to begin. We left the stunned ballroom, the whispers of the horrified guests fading behind us like distant static. Ethan and I walked out the front doors of the Heritage. Dr. Sterling's quiet words of support and Professor Davies's protective presence still echoing in my mind. Marcus, Ethan's corporate lawyer, a sharp-eyed, no-nonsense strategist in his late 40s, was waiting in the lobby. He greeted me with a firm, businesslike handshake. "Ava," he said, his voice instantly instilling confidence. Ethan filled me in on the basics. This is certainly a situation. We quickly retreated to a quiet area of the lobby, where Marcus pulled out a legal pad and began taking notes. I recounted everything: the disowning, the mental health crisis, the 5 years of separation, the family's public lies, and the overheard recording about the trust fund. I played the recording for Marcus. Sky's cold, calculated voice, discussing how I forfeited my trust fund, filled the air. "This is excellent evidence," Marcus stated, nodding crisply. "It shows clear intent to defraud. Combined with the public lies tonight and the respected witnesses, we have an exceptionally strong case." He confirmed what I had hoped. My grandmother's will was airtight. There were no clauses about college graduation or family contact. The money was unconditionally mine. Their attempt to claim otherwise was pure fraud, based on the assumption that I would be too broken or too scared to fight back. The meeting with my family and their attorney, Donald, happened 3 days later in Marcus's downtown office. The tension in the conference room was suffocating. I sat next to Marcus. Across the long mahogany table sat Richard, Blair, Sky, and a nervous-looking Donald. Donald tried to open the meeting with a plea for privacy and a discussion of a settlement. Marcus cut him off with a surgical precision that made my father flinch. "Mr. Vance," Marcus said, referring to Donald, "your clients attempted to defraud my client out of money that legally belongs to her. They have no leverage here. We are not negotiating a settlement. We are informing them of what will happen next." He slid a stack of documents across the table. The paperwork was titled Involuntary Severance and Financial Cession Agreement. "These are the terms," Marcus dictated, his voice cold and emotionless. "First, you will provide complete and immediate access to the trust fund established by Ava's grandmother. Second, you will all sign a legal document stating you have no claim to that money, now or ever. Third, you will cease all contact with Ava, permanently, unless she initiates it. Fourth, you will immediately and permanently stop using her name, her business success, or any reference to her in your social or professional circles. You will not profit from the relationship you destroyed." He paused for dramatic effect. "If you fail to comply with any of these terms," he continued, leaning forward, "we will pursue criminal fraud charges." We will also provide copies of the recording and the witness statements from the graduation party to every one of your business colleagues and social contacts. The choice is yours. Reputation or exposure. Donald looked at the documents, then at my parents, his face pale. Blair was crying again, but these were real tears now, the tears of a woman facing consequences she couldn't control. Richard looked utterly defeated, the mask of power finally gone. Skye stared fixedly at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. "This is extortion," Donald whispered weakly. "No," Marcus corrected. "This is justice. Your clients can sign these papers and move on with their lives, minus the money they tried to steal and the daughter they tried to exploit. Or they can refuse, and we'll ensure everyone knows exactly what they did. Their reputation will be destroyed, and they'll still lose the trust fund case in court. This way, at least they maintain a shred of dignity." After a long, agonizing silence, Richard finally picked up the pen. "This isn't over," he muttered as he signed. "Yes, it is," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "This is exactly as over as it gets." One by one, they signed the documents. Blair, Richard, and even Skye, who was listed as a secondary beneficiary. Each signature felt like a shackle snapping, a weight lifting from my soul. When Marcus collected the final signed papers, I felt a deep, profound sense of peace. I had faced the demons of my past and secured my future. The years of worthlessness, the trauma of abandonment, were finally being paid back, not with revenge, but with definitive legal closure. I had won my freedom. The trust fund transfer was completed 5 days later. The amount was substantial, much more than I had expected. My grandmother, it turned out, was not only loving, but also financially brilliant, investing wisely so the fund had grown significantly over the years. Suddenly, combined with the successful revenue of Ava Design Studio, I was genuinely wealthy. But the money itself was a secondary victory. The true triumph was the finality of the legal papers, the cessation of contact, and the undeniable recognition that my self-worth was no longer tied to their acceptance. I was free. The momentum continued. The medical school contract came through the following week. Dr. Sterling made it clear the project was mine based entirely on the merit of my portfolio and the professionalism I had demonstrated, not pity or drama. He admired the resilience required to build a company worth over $5 million a year after being abandoned. That contract was proof that my success, earned in solitude and desperation, was stronger than my family's inherited status. My family, meanwhile, could not recover from the public spectacle. In a tight-knit community like Nashville's elite, reputation is everything, and word spread like wildfire about what had truly happened at Skye's graduation party. Their meticulously crafted image of the perfect family crumbled instantly. Friends distanced themselves. They didn't want to be associated with people who would treat their own child with such calculated cruelty and attempt financial fraud. Richard's development firm suffered. Partners quietly ended collaborations, finding excuses related to trust and ethical alignment. Blair withdrew from her charity boards and social clubs, unable to face the quiet judgment and thinly veiled curiosity. They were now living in a world defined by the truth, not the fiction they had authored. Skye eventually completed her residency, but she struggled to secure a good placement. The knowledge of the recording and the ethical questions surrounding her behavior had, inevitably, made its way through the medical community. She eventually relocated to a different state, trying to start fresh where no one knew the devastating story of the golden child and the inheritance plot. They had built their entire lives on appearances, and when that structure collapsed, they were left with nothing but the empty shell of their reputation. For me, the years that followed were dedicated to pure creation and growth. 6 months after the confrontation, I stood in my expanded, beautiful office space, watching my team of 25 employees work on projects that were genuinely moving the needle for our clients. The success felt real, earned, and unshakable. I was surrounded by a chosen family, Ethan, Marcus, and my loyal team, who valued me for my talent and my integrity, not my last name. I learned the ultimate lesson. You don't need your biological family's approval to build a meaningful, secure life. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is severing the toxic ties that bind you to a narrative of failure. I had always been seeking their validation, but I discovered that true happiness and security, the kind of security that protects you in your older years, comes from validating yourself. It comes from building a foundation so strong, so self-sufficient, that no one, no matter how powerful or wealthy, can ever take it away from you again. I walked away from them at that graduation party, and in that moment of turning my back, I finally stepped into my destiny. That was the moment I truly won. For many of you watching, especially those who have navigated complex family dynamics or faced career setbacks later in life, the core lesson here is resilience and self-worth. Never let someone else's definition of success or value become your cage. Whether you're 25 or 65, the greatest safety net you can ever build is your own competence, your own integrity, and your own unwavering belief in your right to happiness and security. My family took away everything, but they could never take away my talent or my fight. When you create your own currency of independence, you buy the only freedom that truly matters, the freedom to be yourself unconditionally. Have you ever had to choose between staying within a toxic situation for security or leaving for the sake of your mental health and independence? What was the moment you realized your self-worth was non-negotiable? Share your stories below. We are all building our own empires, brick by hard-won brick. Thank you for listening to my story. Your support means the world.